So I'm really going to ask you a lot of the same questions that I asked you when we talked a couple of weeks ago.
Oh, okay.
But
hopefully we'll have the same answers.
yeah, well, I'm sure you will. And a lot has happened since the last time we talked, because the last time we talked, you had said that night you were going in to do color.
Oh, yes.
And so, I want to get to that and ask you how that went. So, I guess the first thing I'd like you to do is just introduce yourself. Like, who are you? And speak up, because we got a lot of ambient sound.
Sure. Doug Sellers, producer, actor, writer, and director.
Okay.
And I'm Dawn Sellers, and I'm a writer, director, filmmaker, new at that, but
And a walk-on actor.
And a walk-on actor. I have done a couple of walk-on acting gigs, yes.
So you both are in the film profession. How did you two get into it?
Well, it's sort of a full circle story. When we met about 27 years ago, actually, what is the date today? July 15th?
Yeah.
So it was 27 years ago yesterday that we met.
Yesterday.
Oh.
Doug was working in the film industry doing locations, and I had a regular Monday through Friday 9-to-5 job. And we liked each other, but his schedule was very erratic with the film industry, because it is very long hours and not a regular job at all.
Well, I'm just curious, how did you two even end up in the same proximity?
We met on a blind date.
Ah.
We were introduced by friends.
Okay.
And so Doug was working in the film industry, and long story short, he was offered a job out of state and decided not to take it because we were getting along and wanting to take things further in a relationship. And so he went to work, he got a corporate job and left the film industry. I thought it was crazy. I thought the film industry was crazy. And then here we are 27 years later, and right before the pandemic, I decided I was going to write. That we closed our restaurant and bar, and
you had a restaurant and bar.
We had a restaurant and bar for a short time.
This is starting to sound like a Rube Goldberg machine. It's like
I know.
This is connected to that, connected to that.
We left the corporate world, started the restaurant and bar, and that was even crazier. And
what kind of a restaurant was it?
Wine bar, full restaurant, American food, live music, lots of events. It was very stressful and a lot of work.
Where was it?
In Hillsborough.
Okay.
Yeah, and so we...
and what was the name of it?
Primrose and Tumbleweeds.
Okay.
And then we decided to retire. Doug was diagnosed with Huntington's disease.
How long ago?
That was in 2019, right before the pandemic.
Right.
And so we had decided that we were going to travel, just stop working and travel. Then the pandemic hit, and so that kind of squashed those plans of travel. But we had already made the decision to retire and close the restaurant. And so I started writing, and then shortly after that, he started writing.
What motivated you to start writing?
Well, I have a story that I really want to tell that is about Doug's great aunt and his grandmother, and the sisters. There are 4 sisters. And so I have a story that I really want to tell about them. And so that's kind of my big project, I call it. And then I got sidetracked a little bit with filmmaking. So the story, I think, would be it will be a big novel. It's kind of a saga. So it's a very involved story, but part of it will make a great film, a great movie. And so my plan is to write the novel and then make the film. But I felt like I needed some experience first, and so I've been writing screenplays and dabbling in filmmaking to sort of get the experience I feel like I need to tell the story the way it needs to be told.
So getting back to that just for a little bit, what was it about Doug's relations that captivated you enough to make this sort of like a grand plan?
Yeah, it's so grandmother and what she thought were two sisters, their mother died when they were all very young, and so they were kind of split up between the aunts and the grandparents. So they were separated, these three sisters. This was in, their mother died in the flu epidemic in, 1920, early 1920s.
We were just kind of talking about that.
Yeah, and so they were split up, and
their father had died.
And their father died shortly after that. And then in the 40s, the early 1940s, they discovered in their mother's trunk with her wedding dress a lock of hair and a birth date that didn't match any of the three girls, and the name Dorothy. Well, the youngest, Doug's grandmother was the youngest, and she was also named Dorothy. And so it was confusing because that wasn't her birth date or her hair. And so they knew something was up. And so they started questioning the aunts. And the aunts said, yes, there's another child. And so then not long after that, there was an article in the newspaper. So the missing sister, Dorothy, she had put an article in the newspaper. She'd been searching for her family her whole life. And she in the day of no internet, no easy access to anything. So she finally tracked down.
You said this was in the 1940s.
This was in the early 40s, like 1939, 1940. And so she tracked down this little town in Washington, Tico, Washington, which is in the middle of nowhere outside of Spokane. As soon as the article was in the newspaper, the sister that lived in Tico knew, because they had this lock of hair and this date of birth, so they knew that it was their sister. But they didn't want to tell people because of the scandal. Because it's a small town, they didn't know the full story. Their parents weren't married when this child was born.
Right.
The sisters there are four sisters, and they were all so amazing in their own right, even though they didn't grow up together. So Dorothy, the first Dorothy, the one that was adopted out, and really I think was part of the black market of children in 1907 when she was born, because there were a lot of hospitals, we'll say, they were called sanatoriums at the time. They would take in young, poor, unwed mothers, and they would basically steal their babies and sell them. And there's a lot of research around that I've been doing, and I think that Dorothy kind of got caught up in that. Like, I think she was sold, because the mother, Elsie, went back to get her daughter, and she was gone. And then there was a fire shortly after that, and all the records burned. So Dorothy was never able to get her birth records because they burned in this fire, and so it was all very mysterious. But she finally tracked down her sisters. All of them very amazing. So Dorothy Starr, the first Dorothy, went on to be a famous opera singer, and she ended up owning a business in San Francisco called The Music Stand, where she had the world's largest selection of sheet music. And that was when did she open that? In the 60s, maybe?
60s.
In the 60s. And that was really where she ended up finding her family, was with music and musicians. And now all of the sheet music has been given to the San Francisco Library. There's a Friends of Dorothy Starr group, nonprofit, and all of her sheet music is on display at the San Francisco Library. Or in storage there, but it's
There's a lot of
available
storage,
there.
but you
And
can
so
have access to
they don't know this story. Like, they don't know all of this about her. They only know her notoriety as this woman who owned all this sheet music.
Right.
And then the other sisters, so Doug's grandmother was really one of the first women able to buy land. She purchased her own land in the early 50s. She had her own business. She designed crafts and wrote books on crafts in the 70s and was very famous, traveled teaching. And then another sister, Eleanor from Tico, she's the one that lived in Tico, She was, I think, the first woman to be in the as a CPA in the state of Washington. And then the other sister, and then she was also very well known in Tico, which was part of the whole scandal that she didn't want people to know about her family, because her and her husband built the airport, they built the ambulance service, the nursing home. I mean, they were very well known in this small town in Washington.
And she also had a children's clothing.
She designed children's clothing and sold that when her daughter was young. And then the other sister, Fern, wrote a book about water rights, Moses Lake. When she inventoried all of the water in Moses Lake, and we found this manual that she had written about all of it. So all of these 4 women who, but they were all, Doug's grandmother was born in 1921, and so, 1912. The mother died in 1912, and she was the youngest. So from 1907 to 1912, these women were young, and they were doing things that women weren't really allowed to do in that time. And they didn't make a big deal of it. They just did it because it was what they did.
Right. Well, and they didn't get to see each other very much because you had to travel by train. So you'd have to get to a train station, and when you lived out, like they lived out in Telecasset, North Powder, which is way out eastern Oregon.
Right.
So you'd have to maybe go into Baker to get a train, and then take the train to Spokane, and then have some other mode of transportation before cars to get down to Tico to see your sisters. So they didn't get to spend a lot of time together, so they became very individual, in their own nature.
And so we have all of the letters that they wrote to one another during this time of finding their sister. And so it's really in their own words, the discovery of their sister, trying to figure out if she really was their sister, if their father was really the same father, and just how they met, and then them getting together, and then thinking they were going to be close, but they weren't close, and just all of that. It's very, as you can see, it's a saga.
And it sounds like it's really captivated you. And Doug, I'm watching Dawn describe this, and I'm thinking, this is your family. Did you know anything about this?
Well, no, not until Dorothy Starr passed away. I didn't even know she existed. It was never discussed in my family growing up. And when my mom and my great aunt were going to San Francisco together, I thought, why would those two be going together? They weren't very close. And then I found out one of the sisters died. I'm like, well, Fern lives in Moses Lake,
Right.
And then Grandma says, oh no, we have another sister. And I'm like, how did I not know this? Why weren't, where was she during the 50th anniversary and the family reunion? And she wasn't welcomed.
Yeah.
She really just wasn't welcomed. She kind of burned her bridges with all the sisters.
But it sounds like you're trying to rebuild those bridges.
I am. I just feel it's a story. I'm obsessed with the story, and I think mostly because of the strength of these women.
Yeah, they were strong.
And how they did such amazing things alone, without support from other women or anyone else, really. And meaningful things, really meaningful things of the time. So I really feel like this story has to be told, and no one else knows it. We have all of the documents, we have everything, and so I have to tell the story.
Is it your intention to play a part in reconciling successive generations of the family?
There's no one left. Doug's the last of the family, and so the story will just be gone if it isn't told.
Right.
And I think there are so many stories like that just go away because no one tells them. But I feel like this one is so important, it needs to be told.
So tell me about the side project, which is your TV show. Is okay, that's the
big,
little one.
I call it the big story.
Okay, that's the big story. So then but you're working on a little story, which also doesn't seem like a very little story.
Yeah.
A project that's pretty ambitious.
Yeah.
So talk about that.
So in my kind of dabbling in screenwriting and filmmaking, during the pandemic, we couldn't travel much, but we did travel across the U.S. On road trips. so it was safe to be in your car and in hotels and things. And so we took a few road trips across the U.S. And that was during the time, it was right after the George Floyd murder, when the riots were happening, and Portland was having a lot of difficulty, and Portland was in the news a lot. It was the beginning of that, when Portland was in the news a lot. And getting really a bad rap for a few things that were happening that were horrible. And so as we're traveling across the US, we would talk to people, and people would always ask, where are you from? And when we would say Portland, they would say, oh, is it as bad as we hear? I mean, that was just the instant response from everyone. And so we would have to tell them, no, it isn't. It's, one block, and yes, it's horrible, and there's a lot of bad things happening, but, Portland is a wonderful place.
And it's temporary.
And Portland is a wonderful place. And so as we're traveling, I start writing the story in my head, and I thought, well, the food carts have such a big part of Portland and what the new trend of Portland. And no one has really done a story about a food cart lot in Portland. And so I sort of wove those together about talking about how the food cart culture is very diverse and how it gives people a lot of opportunity. And I also want to infuse a little bit of history about Portland. And what makes it so great. Doug's a native Portlander, born and raised in Portland. I've been in Portland since the mid-'80s, and so we've seen a lot of changes, and a lot of things that have stayed the same, and just, we love Portland. I love Portland. No matter where we travel, I'm always happy to come back to Portland. I think there's so much here for everyone. And so I wanted to showcase that in a series. And so I decided to call it Almost Boston, because Portland was almost named Boston, which not everyone realizes. And as quirky as Portland is, the naming of it is quirky too. It was named by the toss of a coin. And so it was almost called Boston. It was between Boston and Portland won. And so I think that's sort of a good way to start telling the story about how it was named, and then just some other little bits of history. So each episode will feature something about Portland. And in the pilot episode, as we're introducing all of the characters, there's a random rooster that wanders through the food cart lot.
Why?
Because Portland is such a chicken-loving town. I mean, most people in Portland have chickens. It's a wild thing.
But isn't there some kind of law in Portland about chickens?
There is. So you can have chickens. You can have three chickens in city limits, but not a rooster. And so I had to make it a rooster. And so through the pilot episode, it's about kind of, why is there a rooster here, and whose rooster is it, and we need to catch it and take it outside the city. And so that's sort of the underlying story. And then the main story is an FBI agent whose cover was blown because her mother made cookies with sesame flour, and her partner was allergic to sesame seeds. And so as they were on this case that they'd been on for a year, her partner has an allergic reaction and their cover is blown. And so she knows all about this case that she's trying to solve, and so they send her to Portland to work in a food cart. She doesn't know how to cook, but she just needs to lay low and just do nothing. And that is so not her character. Like, she's this focused FBI agent who wants to solve this case and thinks Portland is crazy and weird, and as an outsider would. And so throughout the series, she's slowly going to fall in love with Portland and the people of Portland, and she's going to realize that this ensemble cast is really a community who's trying to help one another. And they're all sort of on their last chance in their life, and they're trying to make a business out of their food carts. And so she sort of helps them along the way. And then there's these two old retired FBI guys who've been assigned to watch over her, to protect her, because the FBI agent that's supposed to watch over her is this bumbling agent who got his last person accidentally got killed. but his mother is an FBI like supervisor, and so that's why he still has a job.
So how, I mean...
It's a lot of stereotypical Portland things.
Well, the backstory, I mean, it's like, how are you going to sort of like reveal the backstory over time? Because there's lots of backstory.
There's a lot of backstory, and we start to do that in the pilot episode. So we introduce the ensemble characters and sort of why they're there, and a little bit about each of them. And then, you know, the pilot episode is only 30 minutes, and so there's a lot that happens in the first episode. But throughout the series, we'll slowly reveal those layers of each character, and how they interact, and why they're where they are, why they're in Portland, what they love about Portland, while we're infusing these bits of history about Portland and how great it is.
And how is the process going? I mean, where is the pilot? And how many pilots are you going to, how many episodes are you going to produce, and where are your episodes going to be shown?
Yeah, that's the big question. So the pilot episode is almost finished. I'm just waiting for the final sound edits to happen this week. And then we'll be premiering it, an invitational premiere on the 29th of July at the Judy Theater in downtown Portland. So that will be the first time it's shown. And then my plan is to enter it in festivals. And so I have a festival strategy, festivals that like comedy pilots of this nature, hoping to find a producer that would fund the whole series.
You had also mentioned earlier in another conversation, you had said that if it gets picked up, there's a good chance that the production company may completely change it.
Exactly, and I think that happens a lot with stories that, you know, if a large producer buys it, they may film it in California, or they may reshoot the pilot with different actors, well-known actors, or they may go to Canada.
How would you feel about that? I mean, do you have any kind of editorial control over it?
Yeah, well, right now I do, because I own it. So I don't have to sell it in that way. Like, my hope, my ideal situation is that someone loves the story as much as I do, and that they want to produce more episodes here in Portland. And that I would somehow be involved in that, and that they would use the same actors that I've cast, because we have an incredible cast of local actors and local crew. In fact, more than 50% of our cast and crew are female, which doesn't always happen in the film industry these days, or ever. And so I'm pretty proud of that. We have really talented cast and crew. And so my hope is that whoever funds the rest of the series and episodes would film it here in Portland.
Well, I'm also thinking that the Portland Film Commission should be able to give you support and help, because, I mean, several television shows have been produced here. Portlandia was produced here, Leverage was produced here for a while. I think there's been a couple others. So, I mean, what kind of support are you getting from the city?
So far, nothing. I haven't gotten anything. I've tried to reach out to them. I've invited them to the premiere, and I haven't gotten any response so far.
Which is interesting when you consider that Portland is trying to sort of dig itself out of this PR hole.
And I really feel like this episode, or this series could do that, this story. I feel like it really can showcase the great things about Portland, and really the efforts to come together as a community and rebuild. Because that's really what the story is about, is rebuilding and coming from nothing, or, you know, being down on your luck and then coming back and being successful.
Well, I think that there's just so much of that rebuilding happening right now that we're just not on the radar.
We're just not on the radar, maybe.
Yeah.
But I'm hoping that, you know, to sort of get some local recognition in festivals that happen locally, and maybe get noticed.
It's in the Austin Film Festival.
It is. I've submitted to the Austin Film Festival already, because they accepted the rough cut, and then I'll just update them with the final cut.
That's a big one.
Ready, yeah. And so I'm hoping that it gets accepted there. I think it's, you know, Austin tries to say that they're Portland's sister city. They try to compare themselves to Portland all of the time, and so I think it's a good fit.
And they are.
And they are. They're very similar.
And we've been part of the Austin Film Festival for a few years, and we travel there every October for that. And it is a fun, quirky city, much like Portland, and the people are just as wonderful and lovely.
So what about other regional festivals like Sundance or Las Vegas?
Yeah, I'm not sure that it's the right kind of a film for Sundance. I don't know if they take a lot of comedy, but there are some, like the Beverly Hills Film Festival. We were there this last couple of months. We went down to LA for another film that we had worked on, and that festival was happening then, and I think it's a good fit for that festival. There's the Palm Springs Festival, so I'd really like to get it where the money is. Yes, the Oregon Film Commission has some money and some support, but there just isn't enough. We need more.
Right.
There's a lot of independent films happening here in Portland, a lot of talented filmmakers, and money is the big challenge. And it would be wonderful if we could get more state-funded support for local film. I think Portland could really, and Oregon in general, could really be much bigger in that industry than it is.
Yeah, the indie community here is huge. It really is.
And there are a lot of filmmakers from LA and Atlanta that are here, that live here part-time. And so there's a lot of talent here.
Right.
Well, and when there was multiple TV series being filmed at one time, there was a lot of people that crewed up in Portland.
Right.
And, they learned great skills, and unfortunately, when those pilots and things left, either they had to move out of the area or they're here still looking for jobs.
Right.
And so, they're working on a lot of indie projects until, something happens. And now we have Criminal here, which is a big production, but a lot of those bring their own crew from LA.
Right. So I wanted to also go back to something that you had mentioned very early in the interview, where you had talked about how Doug was diagnosed with Huntington's disease.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to talk a little bit about that. That has no doubt put a clock on a lot of the things that you want to do.
It has.
Talk a little bit
Sure.
about that.
Yeah, I mean, we all think we have so much time and there's so much time to do things, but then something like that can happen and you realize that your time is very limited. And for us, we know, so Doug's mother also had Huntington's. It is a genetic disease. And we expect that he'll progress as his mother did. And so
there's like a timetable to follow.
There's about a 10 to 15 year timetable right now. And we're probably, we're 2 to 3 years into that. So, time is ticking away. And yeah, I think there's a lot of things that we want to accomplish together before he isn't able to be mobile. And be able to physically do things. So he's been acting a lot. He's been submitting for different acting jobs because he loves to do that. He's very talented at that. He's in Almost Boston as one of the old FBI guys. So yeah, I just feel like some of this, I do feel like I'm in a hurry to get this done, and so I'm very focused on working hard and making good films.
Doug, do you mind if I ask you some questions about your diagnosis?
Of course.
For people who have an idea that these kinds of things only happen to other people, or don't know anyone that a diagnosis like this has happened, whether it's cancer or whether it's MS or whatever it is, how has it changed the way you look at life?
Well, I've always been pretty optimistic, and I've always been pretty, satisfied with life. I've been very fortunate to be raised to appreciate what I have and not dream about things that I don't have. And I think what it has changed for me is just a bigger appreciation of my relationship with people. That connectivity with people and finding people that give you great joy. And we have really concentrated since we retired to keep everybody that's a negative asset out of our lives, and just to move forward and to stay our course and to have only people in there that can help, paddle along and that we can contribute to their life too, because that's what it's really about. And that kind of, treasure, if you will, is worth more than anything else. To have those people, those people that really are meaningful in your life, and to work alongside of them and be part of our projects and allow us to be part of their projects is very fulfilling.
Right.
And so I think we just focus on the positive that we can, know that there is that ticking clock, and not dwell on it, and
Right.
try to enjoy, each day as it comes.
Yeah, and even now we have good days and bad days.
Yeah.
I mean, Doug has a lot of symptoms. It's not evident today, but he has days, and it's very unpredictable. That's the hardest part, is it's very unpredictable. He'll have days where he's not, he can't mentally process things, or gets easily overwhelmed in groups, or if there's a lot going on, a lot of noise and things going on. And so I think just taking it day by day, and on the good days we accomplish as much as we can,
Yep.
and then on the bad days we do nothing,
Right.
and we just
Sit.
Doug sits and I do what I can do at home, and work on things, and just we make it work. I mean, we're both, I think, very realistic and optimistic about the process. We're fortunate in that we know what's going to happen. So I think sometimes with, cancer or getting hit by a car or, whatever, you don't know when things can happen that could change your life. And, this happened, we had about a year to process it before we got the final results. And then, we're just very realistic about it, and
Well, and being there, in my mom's last years, helping her and really seeing what it's involved with, drew a very clear picture of what to expect. And so, as ugly as that is, and painful as that experience was, we're trying to set ourselves up to where it's not so bad.
I read a set of interviews from caregivers, hospice nurses, and the consensus that they had was that although end of life is painful for friends and family, death is nothing to be feared.
Right.
Is that a conclusion that you've come to?
I don't fear it at all. I just want to make sure that, I have the best experience going out.
Yeah. Exactly.
I just want the rest of it to be happy and, to spread love and joy to everybody I can. That's what's most important.
And I think doing that through story is a really
Yeah.
good way to tell stories that can have an impact or can
Leave a message.
leave a message. I
Right.
think that's really important, and I think that's both of our focuses. Doug writes also, as we both write and make films and plays, that it's really about a message, a good message, and how people are good.
They
People are good.
Just as an observation, I mean, the chemistry between you two is so calm. I mean, I know that you may have bad days, and of course, I don't know what those are. But right now, it's like it's very, very sanguine.
That's kind of how it is. It's
Yeah.
funny that you say that, because my mom, who isn't with us anymore, but my mom, when we first got married, she asked me if we fought. And I said, no, we don't fight at all. And she said, well, that isn't right. You should have arguments, because my mom and dad would fight all the time. But and I'm like, no, we don't. We discuss things that are important to either of us, but
We both grew up in families that argued.
that
and
argued a
fought.
lot. So yeah,
But my grandparents, I was primarily raised by my grandparents, and they never did. I never heard them raise their voice at each other. They would wake up every morning and discuss everything they were going to do that day. So their communication skills were just beyond anything I could ever. I mean, I'm trying to live up to those, and I try every day. But my grandfather, always would say, there's no reason to fight. If you really want to fight, he'd say, both of you take off all of your clothes and see if you want to still fight. That was his message. He goes, there's no reason to do that. It's a give and take in the world. And, when it was like my grandparents, when either one of us are really, really super passionate about something, we go with it and we try it. No matter if I think that's a mistake or not. If Dawn's super passionate about it, I want to see it through for her, and the same with me, So we don't fight over that kind of stuff.
I think it has a lot to do with trust,
Right?
and just trusting that we've thought it out, and we're passionate about it, and we really want to do whatever it is. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Listening to you two, I mean, it seems like being able to live a life to where you have a partner that you trust, who has your back, you both can agree on how to communicate, you both can agree on direction. It's a blessed life.
It is.
It is.
Because so many people don't have any one or any of those. So, okay.
No, I feel very lucky.
Yeah.
I mean, I think we're both very lucky, and those friends that set us up on that blind date 27 years ago, I think knew both of us pretty well.
Yeah, I agree.
They were right. I remind them of that all the time.
Yeah.
You were right.
So tell me about the name of your company.
Oh, yeah. So, Broken Toe Productions is our film company that we started. We went to Austin Film Festival a couple of years ago. And right before the festival, we had a writing retreat at the coast. And I accidentally rammed my foot into a chair at the place we were and broke my toe. And so, I'm not one to rush to the doctor or anything. I'm like, I'll be fine. I just bandaged it up, and off we went to Austin Film Festival. And I'm in pain with this big swollen foot. And so while we were there, it's a lot of walking around the city and going to different panels and speakers. In different venues. And Doug was wearing flip-flops, and he was going up the stairs in this old stone church. He tripped, because sometimes his balance isn't great, and so he tripped and broke his toe. And
Same toe?
Big toe. My big
His
toe.
big toe, different toe, but yeah. And so here we are, both hobbling around Austin, but we're determined because we're so motivated with this film festival and so excited about it.
Yeah, it was great, Joey.
And so we hobbled around for the few days that we were there, and then on the flight back, we were so inspired to make our own films. Because we had met some filmmakers there, and we're like, we can do this. We should just be making our own films beyond what we've written. Let's do it. And so we're like, well, what should we call our company? And we looked at each other and we thought, it's obvious.
Broken toe.
Broken toe. Which really, it kind of, comes
Stands
out
out.
of nowhere.
Yeah.
It's sometimes painful.
Right.
Yeah.
So one other question that I have for you guys is it's encouraging for me, as well as for people of a certain age, to see people who are of a certain age still full of passion for something, still willing to try something new. Because the culture focuses on young people and how young people straight out of college start these billion-dollar companies,
Right.
which honestly is a lot like kids in high school thinking that they're going to end up at the NFL. What's the odds of that happening?
Right.
It takes a lifetime of living to decide what you want to do. Do you have the resources to do it? Do you have the help, the backup, the partner? And so when you decided that you wanted to start this company, start these projects, did you look at your age and say, I don't know if I have the energy, or I don't know if I have the ability, or imposter syndrome? Did you go through any of that?
Yeah, I think for me, I do, and I still do, because the word is that as a screenwriter, it takes 10 to 15 years to really break in, and I'm 58, so that's old, especially for a female, and at least that's the perception that females have. I don't feel that. But I think you also get to that point in life where you don't care anymore. And you just, you have all these experiences, and you've tried things that have failed, you've tried things you've been successful at, and it's all a risk. You don't know what's going to happen, but that's the fun of it too. That's the challenge of it, is just to do it. And I am energized when I see other people doing things. We have, friends that have films that are being shown in festivals and winning awards, and we've won awards, and it's just so inspiring to see people do that. And I just want to help celebrate people and celebrate myself too. It's motivating for me to try new things.
And for me, I'm going back to an industry I kind of started in, so it's not a conflict or a stressful thing for me at all. If I could take on something completely new, I probably would, just for fun on the side, because I love learning stuff.
Well, and that's kind of why he has the long hair right now, because it's a look that men of his age don't have for acting. So it's been getting him a lot of gigs.
It looks good.
Jobs that way. Well, and I don't like long hair. I prefer short, so it drives me crazy, but it's okay.
I made him grow it for Almost Boston because I wanted him to have long hair. So now it's working for him. So I'm taking credit for that.
So we're about to close, but is there anything that I haven't asked you that you haven't had a chance to mention that you'd like to?
Well, I think it's important to talk about our nonprofit. So we have started a nonprofit for filmmakers in Portland, because we really felt like there was a need coming out of the pandemic for filmmakers to get together at whatever place they're at in their career. Brand new filmmakers, people that are just interested, people that have been working in film for decades, and so we've really worked to bring people together. It's called POV Filmmakers, and we founded it with another couple. And so we meet monthly, and it's a membership nonprofit. But our mission is to help filmmakers with resources and education and sort of networking with one another to get their films made too. So.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's.
Yeah, it's very important.
Anything you want to talk about, or?
I don't think so.
Come see Almost Boston on the 29th.
Yeah, and give the details of that again. Like,
Yeah,
what's your website? What are your websites? How do people contact you?
Yeah, so our website is brokentoeproductions.com. And tickets are available right now on that website. It's through Eventbrite, but you can get to it from our website. And then I'm on all of the social media, Instagram, X, Facebook, all of them. And then we both have our own websites just with our names.
And then how do people contact POV?
It's povfilmmakers.org.
Okay.
And there's a Facebook group for that as well.
And there's a Facebook group for that as well. And then I also just took over coordinating the International Screenwriters Association Portland chapter. I recently just took that over, and so I'm hosting those monthly meetups as well. And you can get to that through my Facebook.
Okay.
And there's only about 40 tickets left for Almost Boston.
For Almost Boston, yes. There are, it's selling out. I'm hoping it's going to sell out for the screening. So
come get your picture taken with us.
Yeah, come get your picture taken with us.
All right. Well, Don and Doug Sellers, it's really been a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.